come on in. Let me get my inkwell. There we go. Get my paper. There you are. Ungraded exams, no. Research proposals, no. Where's my... Oh, there's my sign-in sheet. Date and time. There we go. Now just write down your name. Thank you. Now, please, have a seat. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first video in a series of videos that I plan on creating regarding my personal world-building project that I call the Worldstone project. The Worldstone project is a high-scale fantasy setting and story spanning many years that I have been in the process of developing and refining for perhaps conceptually over a decade and physically over the past 4 or so years. Today, I would like to read for you all the introductory myth of the elven people of the world of Kathlan, and to tell you a little bit more about them as a people, as they are some of, if not the most important players in the story. So, without further ado, let's get into the creation myth of Kathlan and the culture of the elven people. And if you all like this video, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to let me know, as this is a bit of a departure from the other content on my channel so far. So let me know if you like it, and I'll make more. In the stories recorded by the oldest of the old, elves were the first species on Kathlan, formed when the Korun sang their song and created the Kath, or universe. For Kath, in the Elder voice, means center, or realm in more specific circumstances. Thus, when they were formed, the elves named the world Kathlan, realm home. There they dwelt for many millennia without care, strife, or fear of threat, for they alone held dominion over Kathlan, and their lives were good and long ones. One with nature they were, with deep reverence to the wild and untamed things throughout the lands. Their great cities were built of tree and vine, with neither stone nor metal used. Such was the elves of yesterage's attunement to the land that the trees gave their trunks willingly, developing a synthesis between themselves and the elves. So too did the rivers, lakes, and oceans of Kathlan happily give their waters, their sands, and their fish, that the elves might love them as they did the trees. And so the elves did love them, naming hamlets, steeds, and yes, children after their woodland and aquatic friends. Long after ancient rivers dried up and long-toothed trees withered, the names of elven boys and elven girls bore them so that none were lost to memory. The elves were ever conscientious stewards of Kathlan, treating with due care its forests and its oceans, but also its many animals. Though predominantly vegetarian, some elves preferred, or in rare cases required, as was the case with the clan of the Zindarie, the flesh of animals to endure. Whenever this was the case, the elves endeavored to make full use of the animal taken, with many housewares made of bone, sinew, and marrow. Elven cookware, often made of wood, or in the rare cases where it could not be helped, stone, often had handles or accents of bone. Of all the foods of the elves, fruits are most beloved by the Elderkin. Grapes, oranges, apples, peaches, and many more besides grace the pages of many an elven cookbook, featuring primarily in elven desserts. Most elven foodstuffs were made modestly, their decorative aspect focused primarily on making the dish resemble the thing from whence it came. Trees for those things that came from trees, bushes for those things that came from bushes, and so on. Elven drinks, likewise, were crafted mostly of fruits. Though water was the lifeblood of the elven people, juices, wines, preserves, and ciders featured prominently in their larders. In later times, after the world had become shared, the other species of mortals found the elves uniquely able to withstand the strongest of alcohols without becoming intoxicated. So rich and fine were the wines of the elves that to call a vintage of the trees became a high compliment to its vintner. The elves of old were steward and friend to all, big and small, and were eternally curious folk. The Denu, that is, the Fey people of the wild forests of eastern Kathlan, held a special closeness with them, for the elves respected their independence and did not tread eastward save by the grace of the Denu. From the Denu did the elves first learn alchemy and magic, for in those days the Denu were the masters of magic, as all magic in the world is of the earth, and the Denu came into being as the physical manifestations of the lands of Kathlan. From the giants did the elves first learn of masonry and metallurgy, and from them also the crafting of blades and spears designed for the felling of mortals rather than beast. But the giants cannot be blamed for this, for in their teachings they strove to instill in the elves temperance and caution in their craft, to defend themselves rather than to take from others. And though most elves did adhere to these ideals, some, such as the Zindarier, took these gifts and used them with dark and terrible intent, bringing into the Cath a child of purely mortal design, war. But the Zindarier will be discussed more in depth later. Returning now to the elves and their ways, they were also a people of great artistry and creativity. More even than their culinary exploits, their paintings, sculptures, and especially their music were known far and wide as the finest in Kathlan. Originally, their crafts consisted exclusively of woodworking, whittled animals, decorative bowls and cups, and many other gentle and soft things that never splintered or broke or grew haggard. And more besides their woodworking, they were known for their beauteous floral creations. The greatest gift one could be given by the elves was a crown of Belaras and Karendas flowers, copper and silver colored, respectively, and such a crown was known as an Aminar, translated often simply as among the wise. Among the elves it was seen as a symbol of status, wisdom, and strength, but also of kindness, of patience, and restraint, and for a non-elf to wear one was to be counted as one of the most noble of the immortals. But though such crowns were the grandest of elven offerings, the nearest to their hearts were their creations that spoke to their simplicity and calm. Bracelets and wreaths, boutonnieres and staves entwined with vines, and sproutings of spring colors. For with these the elves could spread much joy and goodwill amongst the younger peoples. And with the art of the giants, the elves became great creators of stone and metal, the architects of tall and noble towers, of wide and welcoming cities, and of powerful and wondrous statues. Over time, years upon years, centuries upon centuries, over a period no one scholar might record, the tree trunk cities and leaf bow burrows gave way to walls of stone and gates of metal, built not for beauty or art, but to guard and withstand. Eventually, the simple splendor of the ancients gave way to the grand imperiousness of more modern times. Their arts turned not to the soft, the round, or the smooth, but the sharp, the jagged, and the hard. Where once the elves offered to others their crafts freely, over time they held them jealously, refusing all who called upon them, preferring instead to build their great works alone, for themselves alone, with no concern or care for the growing world beyond. Great cities they made in those years, of stones of white and gold, of blues and reds and greens. And even in those days, under the lordship of Zindariel, they had not forgotten their way. But now we must turn back to the Zindarier and their lord Zindariel, for the story of the elves is, from now on, incomplete without an understanding of them and of him. The Zindarier, the Pale Ones, began to use the gifts of the Denu and the giants, not for stewardship of the land, but for dominion over it, led by an elf known as Zindariel, who in later years was known as the Pale Shadow. It is said that before Zindariel, the Zindarier went by another name, but such is lost to even the oldest of tales. This Zindariel guided the Zindarier to prominence and power, promising to the other elven lords items of immense strength, forged by the lore of the giants and the wizardry of the Denu. Blades forged of silver, wrought by starlight and imbued with the powers of the moon. Staves crafted from the stolen wood of the ever-gold trees of Coril. And armor bright and glittering, of gold, silver, and steel. But for his finest servants did Zindariel save plates of pure white metal, Mestari. With these gifts did Zindariel win favor with the other elven lords, for in all those precious objects did he inlay runes and enchantments terrible. For so long as he drew breath, those wielding or wearing his creations would be under his thrall. So thus did the first dawn end, for the shadow of Zindariel blotted all else. None who live remember from whence came the one known as Zindariel, and none know who his clan or people were. It is believed by those elven scholars who escaped Elvenas after its subjugation that Zindariel is not an elf at all, but is in fact a creature altogether different and darkly unique. Who or what he is may be a mystery never uncovered, but Zindariel's deeds are far and wide known as the most monumentous and grand of all. For he was not content to lord merely over the elves. During and after their subjugation, Zindariel set his sights on the lands of humanity and dwarfs. But even under the dominion of Zindariel, in all their crafts, whether it be building or wall or otherwise, the elves strove to bring nature and vibrancy into their works, though now it was always tamed and diminished. Zindariel, for his part, ever preferred metal, even to stone, and with magic steel he conjured in the midst of Tarendilan, the capital of Elvenas, known as Sunhome, the first of the mighty towers of magic, which he named Tor Amin, so named for the title he took upon claiming the throne of Elvenas, Amintar, which in human languages means wisest or greatest. So endowed with power were these towers he crafted, that they are believed by many to be capable of creating magic from nothing at all. Lastly, turning one final time to the Elvenos of old, a word must be said of their politics and government. The elves of old were a wholly equal, united, and diverse people. Though the elves had a king, this title is one born of service and ability. A commander who led the armies of Elvenos in war, and who governed in peace the trade and interplay between the elven people. It is a modern revision, however, that this was a monopolized position, for among the elves there were 5 high kings or queens at any given time, their number chosen to prevent ties in the event of a vote, and among the many clans and lands of elves, each had its own council of lesser kings and queens. These were named the Amintariae, or Wise Ones, who with every winter were made to return to their people to reaffirm their mandate. Neither riches nor power nor ambition infected the minds of the Amintariae in those days. For riches they had no need, so long as the forests and hills and rivers provided. For power they cared little, as their lives were unending, and in those rare cases where death did take one of the elves, it was not the end. And for ambition they held contempt, save for in those ways it advanced the art, protected the land, or prolonged the happiness of their people, as it was seen to them as a servant of the enemy, a tool which unerringly led those who betrayed it into ruin. In those days, the Amintariae held council openly and freely under the highest tree of Tarendilan, at which time any elf might speak to them and be heard. Such was the model of all elven homes, and for any decision to be made behind locked or closed doors was seen as a great insult to the elves. In their deputy, the Amintariae had many lieutenants, so that no elf might feel ignored by their governors, and each of these lieutenants were tasked with keeping exhaustively a record of their Amintarians' dealings, so that, when winter snow came, they might stand before the assembly and there make an account of all their dealings, such that none could question their efficacy or their ability. It was seen as the highest form of nobility in those days for an Amintarion to willingly relinquish their title before its time. These were the ways of the elves, but over many years the younger peoples mislearned from their example, choosing instead to rule, to dominate, rather than to guide. This, more than their physical defeat at the hands of Zindariel, was undoubtedly the greatest failing of the elves. And there you have it, everybody. The first in what I hope will be a series of videos where I read out my lore for you, basically. If you are just tuning into the channel for the first time and you stuck around for the whole thing, thank you so much, firstly. Secondly, if you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing, commenting, and liking the video so that you can be notified when I do more stuff like this. If you are someone in my Dungeons & Dragons group who has gotten all the way to this end, thank you so much for indulging my artistry in the way I presented this information to you, and I hope it was useful for you. And if you want to see more of me on a more regular basis than my videos, consider following me over on twitch.tv/Shalesart, Shale on Twitch. Shale on Twitch. I almost said Shalesart, but it's twitch.tv/Shale on Twitch. And then also on Blue Sky. I'm on Blue Sky now, and I'll link that in the the little Dropbox too. So yeah, if you like this, let me know what you thought. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. I love talking about this stuff. That's why I made this video. So if you want to know more, ask me, and maybe I'll make a video on the topic you want to know about. But until then, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.